Hello, my name is Peter Sofronas, and I am a guest on today's What Do You Want to Do?
Welcome to What Do You Want to Do, the show that will hopefully help you figure out what you want to do in life or reconnect you to what you love doing. Each show has a guest who is doing what they want to do, whether it's in their career or in addition to their regular job. Most importantly, we want to help you realize that no matter your age, you too can do what you want to do if you have the will to do it. Now here's your host, Leonard Caplan.
Hi, everybody, and today on What Do You Want to Do? I have playwright, screenwriter, creative person, graphic designer, Peter Sofronas, whom I've known for many, many years. And he started off in the Cable Club, which I mentioned frequently on the show, which was a creative, what would we call that? A creative workshop or something. It was just an amazing place.
Extracurricular activity, for lack of a better term, I guess.
It was an after-school activity that I ran in Swampscott, Mass., and that's where I met you when you were a mere sophomore, I think.
Sophomore, I think. I think our paths crossed when I was a freshman, but I wasn't actually part of the club at that point in time.
Anyway, your biggest success to date has been an off-Broadway version of a play that you wrote how many years ago now, Pete?
Depends on how you want me to answer that question. The place I started writing back in college, so we're going back to like 96, 97. I completed the first draft in 2011, had a premiere production in 2012. The New York production was off-Broadway in the New York Fringe Festival in 2013. I then put it down for a few years and published it in altered form in 2018.
Okay.
In New York, it was known as 2 and 2. The published version is 2 and 2 together, and I'm currently working on an audio drama series based on that play, which is currently in its second season, called Putting 2 and 2 Together.
Putting, Putting, not chocolate pudding, Pudding.
Yes.
That's an amazing trajectory, Peter. I remember when you would show me the first drafts of it, and as true to form as this is for you, you stuck with it and you saw it through until it was finished, through its many changes. And what makes you able, unlike most people, to stick to a project like that so consistently through thick and thin, through a few jobs, different jobs that you've had, and all kinds of other things that went on in your life and career? What makes you stick with it?
Well, it's really a matter of, ultimately, it's the story. The story has morphed over the years. When I first started writing, it was a coming out piece, and then I had been out for years, so it really wasn't important to come out. And then it just became, the play was its own animal, and I realized, okay, I want to know more about this world, and nobody exists in a vacuum. There's always a peripheral circle of friends, family, whatever going on, and I wanted to explore that in a larger form. I had watched soap operas for a quarter of a century, so I knew that storytelling form in which characters could phase in and out or return or whatever, and it always became a matter of trying to keep up with the continuity of a large epic storyline. And my challenge was to try and see if I could do that. And the more I dug into the story, and the more it resonated with me, and the more I experience real life, there's a lot of art imitating life, and life imitating art, and even art imitating life imitating art, and going together in that sequence. So it's really just this overall story that I feel I need to tell that no one is telling. And so pure stubbornness on my part is trying to get me to finish this story. I've worked on it probably half my life anyway, if not 2/3 of it by this point. So I can't put it down until I'm done, since I've worked so hard and so long on it.
That's as good an explanation as I've seen. Uh, you have really taken this thing so far because you turned it into a series, a web series with many episodes, and there are so many stories within that series, although you have a continuing set of characters. Is there any one character based on yourself, or are they an amalgam of you in the stories?
There's a whole amalgam. When I first started writing it, there were two characters, my two male leads, David and Tommy. I think I was an amalgam of the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
But as time went on and I introduced more and more characters, I realized that there are a lot of shades of me in all these characters. So it's really becomes a matter of trying to find the part of that character that's me and let them go. And a lot of times they have a mind of their own at that point. I can't force them to do something that they won't do.
Right. I understand that because I do some writing myself, and the characters do have a tendency to tell you what they want you to do.
Mhm.
And that may seem strange to people who don't write, but
Mhm.
it's amazing, and it makes the writing process that much more interesting, I think.
There is a character who joined the cast in the second season who I play, so I do cater the character to myself. He's not me by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of his personality comes from me because I'm the one playing him. But it's nice to step out of myself but still be myself when doing this character. There are other characters that I play opposite who are probably more me in one respect. So it's really interesting to hear different facets of myself interacting with each other, especially having joined the cast, so I can do it in an active role, not just as a writer director.
Has doing this type of writing with many aspects of yourself sort of split into multi personalities, shall we say, has it helped you in your personal life to make any decisions?
Um, to make decisions, not necessarily,
Or
but
given you insight as to
given
what
me
you're all
insight,
about?
yes, definitely. And there's been cases in which difficult times in the real world, uh, the diving into the fictional world enabled me to look at it from a different perspective, to, in a sense, heal myself. What going on with I wrote season 2 and recorded season 2 while on furlough during COVID. So
Right.
that in and of itself, that became my outlet, my lifeline to be able to exist in a world where I could not be social. I was actually more social as a result of having written and recording season 2 than I normally am in person.
Mm-hmm.
There was the recording took about a month, in which I was doing double, triple sessions each day. So I would be working with at least 2 or 3 actors every day every for a month.
Mm-hmm.
And if I didn't have that, I would have been stuck sitting in, I mean, I was stuck inside anyway, but I would have been inside by myself doing absolutely nothing, having no
Sure.
contact with anybody. So this enabled me to exist in a world where existence was difficult, to say the least.
Plus, you had a goal. So, when you have a goal that you can pursue anywhere, then you're happy anywhere. You're fulfilled and
Mhm.
you're active and you're doing things, accomplishing things anywhere that you want. I want to go back before COVID, before the series, and go back to the off Broadway version. of your play when it was just
Okay.
one thing? How did you get to that point? Because I think the listeners and the viewers would be very interested in that.
Well, it really became it was a series of events. My junior year of college, I happened upon the piece. I was at a coffee shop with two friends. We were talking about the semester, how it was really tiresome, and how it was, we were just venting, and all of a sudden we got this idea to collaborate on a play, and the idea was that each one of us would go on our winter break and write a portion of it. When we came back, I was the only one that had actually done anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I continued on with that piece and had intended for it to be my senior recital, to my senior directing recital, but I was never able to finish that play. Uh, I had some growing to do, both as a person and as a writer. I hit a I hit a symbolic brick wall that I couldn't get over for a decade. There were things that I there was things I couldn't figure out what I didn't whether what it would be, what the story I was trying to tell. And you know, I'm hesitant to use this pun, but I had difficulty putting two and two together, because I mean, literally, that was the case. And
Right.
eventually, in 2010, something clicked, and what took me a decade to reach, I was able to get the first draft done in a month or two. Which is, where you came into the piece, and you actually was at my first informal reading
That's
of
right.
that piece. And then over the next year, I kept rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. And in 2011, there was a formal stage reading in front of an audience in Newburyport. I got a lot of feedback from there, so I rewrote. I entered a contest in 2012 and ended up getting a two performances at Framingham State University. And as a result of that, I rewrote and rewrote some more. And at that point, I got the idea I had heard about the New York International Fringe Festival. And so I submitted in that. And there was at that point, I was associated with a production company, or at least I was introduced to one. And my assumption had been that if I got in, that they would produce it and that would be it. I got in, and then the production company wanted nothing to do with me. So I suddenly found myself in a position where I had an accepted play, but I didn't have the funds to get it produced. And so what was I going to do? So my then partner and I at the time immediately went into a Kickstarter campaign to raise, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
it was maybe $10,000, somewhere in that ballpark, to be able to produce this. So at that point, in addition to being writing director, writer at that point, I didn't actually direct the piece. I had to hire a director, and I was there for the auditions, but I wasn't actually part of the rehearsal process in this thing. But I got a baptism of fire of what it takes to put on a show in New York. It was an overall success, I think, in the grand scheme of things. There were some critical things that stung, and they weren't wrong. But along that same line, while I had those reviews that stung, I actually had a woman who, an actress by the name of Tina Sloan, and she had been on Guiding Light for about the last 30 years of its existence, and she was there in one of the final performances, sitting right next to me as my guest, and she was enthralled with the story that she was watching as much as I was watching her over the quarter century that I did. So that told me there was something there. It was rough. And the New York version, I sat on for a few years while I revamped the story yet again. I realized that there were two key scenes missing. So I wrote new scenes, rewrote some of the existing scenes, and eventually was able to publish that. And, this is the end result, which is available on Amazon. And the other piece of accolade that I'm proud of, which I hope will continue, the drama bookshop that was in New York City, actually about a couple of months before it closed, actually had this on the shelf, which was amazing. And they are finally reopening in the next month or so. And I'm hoping that they will continue to carry the script, which...
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Quite a trajectory. And the different versions. Now you go back and you read the older version. Do you kind of cringe, or are you proud of it, or what do you think?
If I read the first draft that you were part of, I can see where I was going. I see the flaws. I see what I overcame. If I read anything that I wrote in college, I'd be wondering what kind of drugs I was smoking, because it was horrible. I mean, there was a little bit there. There was something, a diamond in the rough, but it was awful. And it had to be, because, your first work sucks. I mean, you have to learn how to become a writer.
Same thing with songwriting, or I think any type of writing. You got to get the flawed versions out first, or the flawed songs. Even the Beatles made some bad songs before they hit big. So let's talk about now. I think we have a good idea of what the writing was like for you over the years and its many versions. What about casting? Because had you ever cast anything before? And how was casting here versus casting in New York? And how does that compare to casting for the web?
I majored in theater in college, so I was exposed to it. And in high school, as you know, I was part of the drama club. So there was the whole, I was exposed to the acting end of it in high school. In college, I was more on the other side of it. My degree was in directing. I didn't do a lot in the way of it, but my degree was in directing. So I was part of, casting in that. When I then went into community theater and was on both sides of the coin for that. So I at least had the exposure to it. When it came time for the New York production, I at least had that under my belt, so I could... Part of it was using what I know, and then part of it is just have to know that I had to learn how to set up a casting notice, on a professional level, had to figure that part out. I was working with an experienced director, a young director who was directing the piece. So it wasn't just me in the casting room. It was the two of us working up, and I was in some cases doubling as a reader in. So whoever was doing a scene was reading opposite me, but it really became a matter of I'm learning as I'm going. I knew what I was looking for, and I had enough of a sense from my own experience to know within the first 30 seconds whether someone is worth continuing with.
Now I'm going to stop you just for a second for people who don't know. Was there a casting director? Were you the casting director, or was it the director who was the head of casting? I know there are different things for different plays depending on the budget. Who made these decisions? How was the split? How are the duties?
For the Fringe Festival, each each particular play that was part of the festival was responsible for their own casting. So it really became, in this case, as the writer and producer, I became my own casting director in this respect. I don't know that that's necessarily done. As a matter of fact, I do know that it's not necessarily done that way in a lot of cases. But in my case, because we're dealing with a small production, an off-Broadway production in which we had, I believe it was 6 performances, and so it became I became the de facto casting director in that respect. And then when I continued on to do the series, well, let me back up. The previous play productions, I was not responsible for casting at all. As a matter of fact, I would walk in toward the end and see what was being done. The New York production was the first one, where I actually got to cast the actors. The series itself, which, to clarify, it's actually an audio drama podcast. It's not it's audio only. There's no video involved here. But I had worked with the majority of the actors who are part of my current cast in other capacities, mostly in community theater, or around the area for the better part of a decade. So I knew I had a pretty good pool of talent for the roles. I knew who I wanted to play I knew who I wanted to play certain roles. In other cases, if I didn't know somebody, they did. I mean, my lead actor who plays the role of Tommy was a find, a brilliant find, but it was someone I had never met before, but a lot of my cast members had worked with him before. And it was a happy accident in which, not only was able to find the perfect lead, but also a really good friendship came out of that.
That's great. That's great.
So as I continue on, I'm now writing the 3rd season, but as I continue on season to season, as new characters come up, I have a laundry list of actors that I would like to work with at one point or another, that if I find the right role for them, I mean, I'm not necessarily writing a role specifically for, just because I want to work with a particular character, just because I want to work with a particular actor, but it's more of, there's this particular character coming up, and I think that person might be perfect for that particular role. And it's more of an informal audition process where I'll have them read it, but I already know their work anyway, so it's really more of a formality in a lot of cases. Whereas when I did the New York production, I didn't know these people, so it was more of a formal audition. This is more of an informal process, and because I already know the work.
Was there ever a tendency or a temptation to direct any of these things yourself?
Well, I mean, I am directing the series myself to begin with.
Okay. But the play in New York, you didn't.
The play in New York, there was the temptation. I already knew that I wasn't going to. I didn't have the experience to do it on that particular level. But also, there was no way that I could have. I was living in Massachusetts. The production was rehearsing in New York. I had already earmarked 2 weeks to be there for the production. I couldn't earmark any more time, so I had to produce from afar. So,
speak to the fact that how many seasons are there and how many shows are there in a season with the audio drama?
Well, if you want to, in between seasons 1 and 2, I adapted the play as a bonus season. I had done a video Zoom recording in which I took the audio from it. So I basically had a 9-episode prequel season, which I call season 0. So if
Mhm.
you count season 0 as a season, which I don't, there would be 7 seasons. And the main seasons 1 through 6, in theory, have 24 episodes apiece. I am, as I said, I'm currently writing season 3. So I'm about 8 episodes in. I have 16 more to write from there. And then I have 3 times 24 to write more in the remainder of the series. So I'm approaching the halfway point, but I'm not there yet.
So how many in a typical season? Just so
24.
for 24. Okay, I might have missed
Yes.
that.
Yep.
So in my view, you've accomplished so much as a director and as a writer and as a casting person. How long can your web series go on? How many more seasons do you think you can add without exhausting the material, or is it perpetual? Is there always
It's
something in there?
as I said, the plan is for 6 seasons.
Okay.
I could conceivably take it further, but I decided going into it that 6 sounded like a good number. You got to figure that's now you have to do math in my head, but 6 times 24.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Don't look at me for the answer.
Yeah, so that many episodes is a lot. I have a 3-year gap in the storyline to tell. So I'm hoping that by the time I reach the end of season 6, I am at the end of that 3 years. Could I go beyond there?
Mhm.
Sure. Do I want to at this point in time? No. I think that would be a good enough time to step away while the story fulfills its destiny.
That's probably a smart way to do it. You don't want to stay around when you've exhausted everything. Now, are there any plans for a new play, a new topic, a new creative endeavor after this?
I'm sure I'll come up with something. I mean, I've written, small pieces here and there, um, mostly short pieces in between stuff, and in some cases, I'm setting them in the same world so I can take characters and cross over. Which there's
Mhm.
actually one play that I had written that in which the characters are crossing over in season 3.
Hmm.
But it's really this has been my focus. I'm using this as a stepping stone to get myself out there. I'm hoping by the time I'm done with this series that it will have built enough of an audience that possibly I could have, work professionally doing this thing.
It's doing pretty well out there. You're getting a lot of viewers. You're getting a lot of subscribers, right?
Yep. Yeah, we've just hit 7,000 downloads this morning.
I saw
So
that.
so
I wanted you to say it. That's why I didn't
yeah,
say the 7,000.
there's I'm hoping that by the time season 2 is done, season 2 has 12 more episodes to air, and I'm hoping by the time we hit that point we will have surpassed the 10,000 mark.
And I got to say the credits on a couple of the seasons, right?
Yes, yeah. There for seasons 0 and 1, I actually was voiced the credits, but I
Mhm.
realized that if I'm joining the cast in season 2, I'm not the focal character, and I didn't want to create the illusion that I was. So it didn't make sense for me to continue doing the voiceover. So I immediately thought, who would be perfect to do voiceovers? Well, how about someone I've known for 30 some odd years?
Well, I
Would
appreciate that. Appreciate you thinking of me. You are perfect for this show because you are doing what you want to do. That's the name of the show. And this isn't the only thing you do, because I happen to know that you are a comic book inker,
colorist.
colorist. I always confuse those two. And describe that sideline for me, for the
Well,
viewers.
I mean, I had, even though I went to college for theater, I was a graphic designer for about 2 decades of my life, and somewhere around I had collected comics since I was in junior high school, and I knew that I wasn't a strong penciler, but I was so much of an artist, and I really wanted to see what it was like to be a comic book colorist. And in 2005, I believe it was, I decided to do it in earnest and started to go to various conventions to try and drum up some work. And I managed to get a lot of uncredited work as what they call a flatter. It's a coloring assistant that's uncredited. But when you receive the line art, they would separate a lot of the shapes to make for easier selections. So by the time a flatter is done, the page will look like an old school comic book. There won't be any shading or anything of that nature. That's usually done by the colorist, but you get the bare bones there. Eventually I started to get some credited work, and there was a post about this on Twitter yesterday, as a matter of fact, in which someone had asked, what is the first comic you ever bought? And I had said that it was G.I. Joe number 24 back in 1984.
Mm-hmm.
And it was involving the first appearance of a character by the name of Zartan. And so that was my first comic book going into it. 20 some odd years later, I was working on G.I. Joe, coloring an issue that told the origin of this character that I was in the first comic book I ever bought. So it was a really cool full circle. As time went on, I realized that this wasn't for me, in that I had the day job, but in order to get more experience in the industry, I had to take on more work, which meant that I was doing a full-time job during the day and a full-time job at night, and I wasn't sleeping. And
wow,
after almost driving off the road a couple times, falling asleep, I realized something had to give, and that was it. And I decided, okay, that's just not for me. I still dabbled, whenever I needed some extra funds, I would take a flatting gig or something to that effect. But on the whole, I knew that wasn't what I was going to do. But that experience of being in the comic industry informed me for my lead character in Two and Two Together, or putting Two and Two Together, who was a comic book artist.
I was going to mention that if you didn't.
Yeah. And, he's now in the series, an ex-comic book artist, but I have that experience in the industry to be able to tell me a bit about that. So that was a case of, I gave him that occupation long before I ever had that occupation. So it was a case of it was a case of art imitating life and imitating art.
You lived Tommy's backstory.
Basically, in effect. At least that part of it, yes.
That's a lesson to everybody who's a writer out there, that you use your other experiences to inform your writing. Exactly. And that's a great thing to do. It adds an authenticity to the character. And the more background you have, even if you don't use it directly, it just permeates the character.
Yeah. I mean, and in this case, I didn't have the experience, so I got the experience, and then having had that experience and deciding I didn't want that experience any longer, right, was able to dictate where that character came in.
All right. So where are we now in the series right now? We're starting a new season?
We are coming off of the mid-season hiatus of season 2. 12 episodes have come out. I was doing a month hiatus. During that hiatus, I have been doing interviews myself of some of the key cast members. The third episode of that series within a series just dropped today. And there's one more interview segment coming up next week. And at that point, the remaining 12 episodes of season 2 will be released on a weekly basis. While that's going on, I am writing season 3. So I'm hoping that by the time season 2 is done, I can start recording season 3. There'll be more interview segments to bridge the gap between season 2 and 3, but it becomes a cyclical nature. I'm either writing or recording or doing the post-production. I'm wearing all the hats. So,
well, that's a prime example of pursuing your passion to the utmost and never going off track and seeing your work come to fruition in many forms. So, Pete, thank you for joining me here on What Do You Want to Do?
Well, thanks for having me.
And what would you want potential writers and directors who are still in high school or in college, what words of wisdom would you give them?
I would say, it's going to sound cliche, but don't give up. It's a case where just because you don't have the answer right now doesn't mean you won't have it. I didn't have the answer. I didn't get it. I didn't understand what I was doing wrong writing wise for the longest time. And you, like any skill, you have to be willing to learn. You have to learn from your mistakes. And I made a whole slew of them. I'm continuing making them. Let's call it what it is. You're going to continue making the mistakes, and you both in life and in art. And it's those mistakes that are going to inform your successes. In every success, there is a shade of failure, and in every failure, there's a shade of success.
Great advice. And thank you for joining me here. And we'll definitely have you back because you're a fountain of information, Pete.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for joining me on What Do You Want to Do? Hope you enjoyed that great interview with Peter Sofronas. And here's Peter right now to tell you where you can find Two and Two Together.
Putting Two and Together is a podcast series, an audio drama series that is released for 24 episodes per season. We're in the middle of season 2, and every Sunday a new episode will drop. You can find it. You can either find it on my website at www.petersofronas.com, or you could search pretty much any of your podcast sources, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, to name a couple, and just do the search for Putting Two and Two Together. That's putting the number 2, the and sign, 2 together. Putting Two and Two Together. Or do a search for my last name, Sofronas, and you should be able to find it. There hasn't been a single podcast platform where I haven't found it yet, unless it's something that I don't know about, but you can pretty much find it anywhere you find your podcasts.
Thanks for joining me on What Do You Want to Do? Hope you enjoyed that great interview with Peter Sofronas. Until next time, what do you want to do?